podcast. So why on earth would you start a podcast? My answer to that is we just stumbled into that. Earlier this year we flew to New York for a trip when we talked about a book project with a good friend of mine, a business partner, and we came back with the idea of saying, like, why don't we just record all the interviews we do for the book and just publish them as well for a podcast? And this thing took off quite well. We were quite surprised how popular it is. So what is my reason why to do a podcast? Well, my number one why is generating content is always a good thing. I believe in this ratio. I don't know who came up with it. I think the Twitter founder. It's called 1-9-90. So 90% of the people just consume content, 9% engage with content, comment and stuff like that, and 1% is producing. I personally believe if you produce content, you're always on the right side. Podcast is a very easy way to produce content because you can, you talk with people anyways. It's very easy to bring it to a high quality level and then publish the podcast. I don't think there is nothing worse than bad audio with a podcast, and we had some bad out there already, but we learned from it a lot, so that's why I shared it today. So how would you actually do it then? There are several things, but the most important thing is actually that we do it in German, our mother tongue, because most of the people we know consume it in Germany. It's not that people in Germany cannot speak English, but if you listen to a podcast as a side thing while you drive or while you're at work or on the way to work, at home, but you do it as a side thing, it's much easier to follow the information if they're in your mother tongue. So that's the number one thing we learned. The second thing we learned is we technically have our equipment everywhere where we go. So this is the podcast with the crazy dudes from Joburg,
South Africa.
Because it's not that heavy. It's like not this whole box. But you could start very, very easy. We did that in the beginning with like a Zoom 1, for example, a thing like that. And then plug this guy here into the Zoom. But the audio quality is much different compared to something like this. This is the Zoom 5 recorder. And this guy is a beast. I mean, the audio quality is so good that you can listen to it at home on your Sonos, for example. There is a mic that comes with it, but we don't put it on the table and then try to sit around it because you would hear every little noise and every scrapping and every little detail on the table, which is then not good for the quality. So what we use are these Shure mics. They look a bit weird. So they plug in with an XLR, which is a much higher quality audio. You spend altogether, I think, 100 each on these, and like 300 or 400 on this guy. And then you have the podcast setup. It's definitely worth it to invest it. What you do is you just, it's actually a good thing that I show that on Sunday when nobody's here to demonstrate that. Let's imagine there is a podcast partner on this side and we then just sit in a room like here. We don't even need a room that is completely locked off from sound. But so the first thing, you want to make sure that you have an SD card that is working and running and not full. That's the most important thing in the beginning, and the battery. It sounds funny, but once you do a lot of recordings and a lot of podcasts, you take this thing around with you, and it's not big, so you can put it easily in a bag and you have it with you all the time. But if it doesn't work, it's a problem for the best podcast out there. So why do an effort and use stuff like that? This is the sound difference you hear right now. So now you hear me talking via the podcast. So you hear there's a very clear, very good sound, and you don't need a huge apparatus. You can just have someone sit there and also have this thing up and then and make the recording. And there's not much to edit. You just make sure that you don't turn it too loud here, so the input is not too loud. We usually put it on 7, so we have enough room to make it louder, which is easier than once it hit the gain to make it actually quiet again. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. What else? So we usually prepared with a couple of questions in the beginning to warm up with whoever we talk to, like our interview partners. And then we do it up to a length of 30 to 45 minutes because people listen much longer to podcasts than they do watch videos, which also is a reason why I talk much faster on the videos than on the podcast. But if you think of that, this is how people then engage with you, your interview partner, and your content. This is really valuable. It's very high quality of sharing that. So what else? What else? Intro. We roll a little intro in front of the podcast, and I know there are many podcasts out there who also do the intro with some advertisement. We don't do that yet. So content-wise, in order to be prepared, we have a couple of questions that we run to warm up before the podcast. So we talk with our interview partners a little bit in the beginning, and then we deep dive into the talk. Yeah, last thing is the post-production. So the post-production is something that you can do with Premiere Audition. If you don't have anything like that, there are other programs, like I think also free programs, or you can also do a little hack with iMovie or Final Cut to just export the audio file. The most important thing is the quality of the input, and make sure you have it quiet. You don't need the perfect quiet room, but you have it quiet and surrounding. It can also sometimes be nice to have a little bit of atmosphere, but you want to make sure definitely that you don't hit the gain, or you don't have any really annoying background noises that you cannot cut out afterwards. That's very important. And last thing, if you record on two sides, just look if both are running properly in the beginning, okay? That's definitely worth it. I hope that was helpful to you guys. If you don't know me yet, my name is Christoph. I'm an entrepreneur. I make videos about entrepreneurship, tech, and how work is changing. And if there are any smart tools that make it easier and more fun as it is already, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and then I see you guys next week.